Hey, Dad,
Hey, Jamie, welcome back
and Happy New Year.
to you too.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna kind of try to wing this one a little bit because we've been talking and talking around a couple things. We thought we'd just start recording and see what happens. Um, we really want to focus on one area of the framework today, which is sources. And the reason we want to do that is because a couple of things have been happening in the news lately that we've both been looking at from a few different angles. Specifically, the Nikki Haley, what was it that she was at, Dad, in New Hampshire? Was it like a forum?
Yeah, I don't know what the event was, but she
Yeah,
was, yeah.
some sort of like voter forum where they could ask her questions. And she was asked a question about the cause of the Civil War. And then we also wanted to talk about the congressional hearing that is older, but when the three women were brought forward from the universities and questioned about anti-Semitism on campus. And we've now had two of the presidents who have resigned, one who's still um, holding her position, and the way that the media has portrayed these different instances. Does that sound like a synopsis, Dad?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think just as a reminder, in the undivided framework that we have, there are various components to how a conversation moves along. And one of the things that we think is important is to understand where the information is coming from that we're discussing. And in a lot of cases that comes from sources that we each have, and we ask people to think about not just the sources of the other people that you're talking to. It's helpful to ask, where did you get that information? But it's also helpful to consider your own sources. Where did you get the information that you have, and what does that mean to the
And not
conversation?
just media, right? But
Right.
also thinking about your own context, your own background, your own education, your family, the things that matter to you. Like all of these things contribute to the kinds of sources that feed into your eventual opinion and understanding of a topic.
Right. And the sources, yes, they can be virtually anything, life experiences. So, yes. But in this case that we were looking at, we thought it was interesting that what is what outlets choose to provide to the public to view or to read regarding these particular hearings or the case in New Hampshire. And we just thought it was interesting for conversation to kind of dissect sources a little bit just on this front. So
Yeah.
that's where we are today.
Yeah. And I think, okay, so the piece that's really been sticking out to me as we've been kind of talking this through, Dad, is in both cases, I think for both of those women, there are these little sound bites, right? Like, you know, 15 seconds or less of sort of question answer. And from that, we are drawing much broader opinions about their ideologies, their philosophies on life, the way that they lead, the way that they might lead, the values that they hold. And I think that's true for both of these people in different ways. But I just thought that it was really interesting because in both cases, and I will throw myself under the bus here, um, I did not watch the entire congressional hearing. I watched maybe more than like the average person, but I didn't watch the whole thing. And I don't even know if Nikki Haley's event had more media than that one soundbite that got put out, but I certainly didn't hear her answer any other questions than the Civil War one. Did you hear more from either of them than those sound bites?
No, and
Okay.
I would say I rely completely on what was either in print or televised or
Okay.
online
Right?
media coverage. Yep.
So I'd say we're probably in that regard very average, right? Like my guess
I
would be
would say 95% of the public would be in our shoes.
yes, right?
Relying on those sources, we probably didn't sit around watching C-SPAN all day long on the day of the
I do
hearing.
sometimes, but not that day.
Right, right. So anyway, we're in
Yeah.
the same boat with a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that has been really coming to the forefront for me is that because we are very average in this regard, and especially over the last week where many of us in the US were off, um, you're hearing a lot of the same sound bites kind of from the left, from the right. And what I'm realizing is that there's like very little nuance and broader context for these people I think, well, actually, I think Nikki Haley had more chance to kind of follow up in newsworthy ways to attempt to change her answer, right? Like some people actually at a second event asked her, like, wait, did you really mean this thing? And then she provided some more clarifying information. I don't think that really happened with Claudine Gay, but maybe it did and I just didn't see it. But I guess all that to say, I think it's been really interesting to watch these two women from very different contexts be put in the news media just around these like really kind of witty's the wrong word, but like snappy sound bites, if you will, right? Like things that are easy to get clickbaity stuff like, oh yeah, I definitely want to hear that. I definitely want to hear that happen.
Okay, so I get what you're saying, but that's the nature of media. That's what it is. I mean, it's going to cover the issues where there's friction, and that's what, by and large, that's what public would like to know. Where are the differences? So when the congresswoman and the witness, when there's friction between those two, that's the part that media will probably focus on. But what I would say too, I don't think it was all. Typically, when you have these issues before Congress, anyway, you hear two different perspectives of the same thing. You can have the conservative side covering its angle on it, and the liberal side covering its angle. So even though you have that source of friction that we're talking about, you have two different ways of looking at it. I
Do you
would
think that was
say
true? Yeah.
no. I would say in this case, in this case, um, with the presidents of the universities, it was more universal. The coverage was, and I think that says something about what went on there, because you didn't really get two different perspectives out of that hearing.
Yeah.
I think everybody looked at it and kind of said something doesn't line up here, right?
So let me ask you this, because you have spent some time in the halls of Congress. So if you are on a committee and you're going to pull people forward that, to be interviewed, to be talked to whatever, who's making those decisions? Who decides who the people are who come?
Well, the committee members can ask for witnesses for specific witnesses. It depends what you're having. I mean, it depends what you're doing. It depends what the hearing is. If it's on legislation,
Yep.
it depends if it's oversight type of things. There's different ways of doing that.
So this was
Typically,
the
typically,
Education and Workforce Committee, right? That pulled
I
these
think was
three.
it. Yep,
I
I
think
think
that's
that's
right.
who this committee was. And again, I don't know the specifics, how it came together, or
Yeah.
what the hearing was to um, the context of that hearing. But whatever the case, typically you will have, everybody is prepared for that hearing to ask questions. Go
Right.
ahead.
The panel. So
Right.
so this is my question. I guess and maybe we don't know the answer to this, but it feels to me like, yes, I agree with you. Media is funded on conflict, right? And I hate that. That's something I would love to change, because I think because of that we're leading into more polarized places with our news media. But I also think that the people who feed into the media recognize this need for conflict, for clicks, for funding, for interest. And so when you have something like a congressional committee that pulls forward only a panel that we know ahead of time is going to be at loggerheads with the people questioning them, what's the point? Is it that they want the world to see that they're at loggerheads? Is it that they want to share their own ideology forward? Do they want to let that panel share their ideology with the world? Like, what's the motivation behind that?
I think there's a number of facets to it. I think you covered a lot of them. Part of it is to help others see how you have your perspective
Okay.
and how you look.
Yep.
And so if you can help that along, either positively or negatively, by virtue of having a witness there that has expertise in an area, that is a way to do it. One of them is to point out to people, this is why I disagree with this person. This is what they say, and I disagree with that. The
Mhm.
other one is to say, this is what they say. They're an expert, and I agree with them, and I'm glad they can bolster my case. But the fact that media is focuses on, you would say, polarizing these things, That isn't anything new. That's been
Of
around
course.
since the beginning of time.
Yep.
And, I just think back if you read the history, of this country, newspapers, either took the administration's position or
Yes.
opposition to
Yep.
administration. And it wasn't like it was hidden. Everybody knew,
Yeah.
that this
Totally.
publication is, it backs the administration or opposes the administration, and their news was presented accordingly. Their news was according, not just their opinion. I mean, that's how they covered
Yep.
things that way. So that isn't anything new. It's partially our job to understand that that's what we're seeing. That's what we're
Yeah.
reading.
Yes.
That's what we're getting. And
I
so,
agree with you, but hang on. I'm sorry. Let me pause you real quick because
yeah,
I agree with you that that's true, and historically that's true. But I think that the thing that is complicating about all of this is that it can then be much harder to find the actual story, the in between, right? We're just getting these sort of right now sound bitey pieces of information. I mean, at least in ye olden days, you were getting somebody's whole speech typed up. You know what
well,
I mean?
I
Like,
think it generate okay, these stories, just like the congressional hearing,
yeah.
it kind of has a life of its own post hearing.
Yes.
Various, it so it
People
ends
go
up,
through and they take out the most salacious pieces and they or
okay, but then
whatever.
we end up with, graduates of Harvard who are in today active in the business world as investors saying, I'm done contributing because this tells me there's something wrong there. This isn't the media, well, the media will cover it, but this is an individual who steps up, and now this is part of the story.
I was gonna say, well,
So
that becomes the news, right? That
yeah,
becomes the news.
that becomes part of the story. So and then there's a focus on that, and so and it has its own ramifications beyond that hearing. But again, I think you can use those hearings in ways like this to try to move things along or to inform. Every hearing is different. What's going to come out of it. This is one where I think there was some outrage at what was going on college campuses across the country. There were some isolated places where they thought we can have some people in to maybe try to explain why this is being permitted on campuses, which is what happened there. And I think after the hearing, there were other people beyond the members of Congress that said, there's more here to be looked at. And it isn't just the hearing itself, it's the aftermath of the hearing and the consequences of the hearing that
Yeah.
have, and I think so it has some effect. You
Yeah.
don't have to have
Do you
legislation to
think
have
in this
effect.
particular case it had the effect that the people who drew them forward wanted it to? Do you think they wanted these people ousted? Or do you think they knew that would happen? Like, I mean, again, we can't conjecture, but like, do you think that was the idea was to create more outrage?
I think it was to raise awareness of people who may not have understood that what was going on campuses and being tolerated on campuses. And
Do you
this helped people expose that.
hang on?
Now,
I don't disagree with you, but hang on, because
mhm,
I'm laughing about this because if I think about the people who wouldn't have known that this was happening on college campuses. So let's just think about who that group of people might be who doesn't know about, anti-Semitism on college campuses. And then I think about the best ways to reach those people. I'm not convinced that a congressional hearing is the way that you get that information out, except that you now have a really inflammatory way to get that out on the news media, right?
well, I
Like,
think people use the tools in their toolbox, and
yeah,
that's a tool in the toolbox of members of Congress, is to be able to expose issues using
using
that
the
format.
current media systems.
Well, I mean, again, that's
Because they
that,
knew, right? They had to have known that that's what they were trying to do here. Because if they were just trying to educate themselves, I don't think we would have had the types of adversarial interactions that they were having, right? There would have been more
well,
questioning,
here's
more
a
listening
part of it. I think everybody's outraged at everything. I think when you have
for
a
different reasons.
hearing when you have a hearing like that, there's a way to define that outrage more and to have people understand what's causing the outrage. And so there's attempts at these kinds of events or at these hearings to be able to pinpoint something that people can see one way or another. And so that's why you end up with those kinds of, as a confrontational type of questioning, that type of, to help other people understand the issue the way the people who are questioning want it understood.
Do you think it actually is doing that?
I
I mean,
think it
that's my
does that.
question because I
I
think
think it
that's
does that. I think it does that. I
I
think
don't
people
know.
knew that there was some, I think they could see that there was friction on campus, but maybe didn't understand what's behind it. The hearing has
Okay.
people understand better what that friction is about and why.
Okay. Because I guess I think about something like that, and to me, that feels very much as the antithesis of like what you and I are trying to do here, right? Like, I don't feel like anybody there was trying to listen to understand. I think they were trying to, again, for better or for worse, right? Like, regardless of how you feel about the issue, I think that that hearing was to try and, um, what's the right word? Like catch people, make known something that they disagreed with, if you will.
Mhm.
And I don't, again, right or wrong, however you feel about it, doesn't matter. But that to me is the opposite of sort of what we're trying to do when we're having a conversation to actually understand, learn, and grow. Now, if you
Right. Well, I
disagree
think
with
there's,
what's happening, I
yeah,
understand that
yeah.
you feel like there needs to be ramifications, like you
Yes.
need something to happen.
Well, again, there's different reasons for, I mean, there's different platforms for however you want to play these things. I think that platform was used in a way that could be used differently depending on what you're doing. Again, if you're looking at legislation, at broad legislation, you're trying to figure out things, you have experts who come in and help you look at little pieces of things. If this is the issue, you have them coming in on, it's a different matter. So yeah, but I don't take that for good or bad. I think that's the nature of the beast, whether it's Congress or media. But I think what's important is, as a part of like our framework, to understand what's behind what you're seeing, what you're hearing.
Can I ask
And
another question though? Hang on, because I agree. You got to know what's behind it, right? And do you think that those people who were the heads of that congressional committee, so the committee happens, they get the soundbite they're looking for or not, but probably are. And now, do you think that they're spending more time? Like, are they still problem solving this? Like, are they learning more? Are they on campuses? Are they talking to college kids?
okay,
Do they still care about this issue?
this isn't, yeah, this isn't an issue from October or November or December of 2023. This is a percolating issue that comes back, and we see it various ways.
Cyclical,
There's
right?
been
Like this happens
concern
over
for
and
some
over.
time. There's ongoing concern about what goes on in our educational institutions, whether it's higher ed, wherever it is. I
Yeah.
mean, it's there's this concern that goes on, and there's a sense that that has been infiltrated. That the education system has been infiltrated, and that our kids, children, young
Infiltrated is a
adults.
spicy word there, Dad.
Yeah, well, but it's that our younger generations are being um, taught differently than the past generations, maybe, and that the priorities aren't right. In a lot of cases,
Some people think that.
well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so when there's an opportunity to shed light on that and to demonstrate that problem, I think there are people who are going to take advantage of that and do what they can to expose it. And I think in part that's what this hearing was about.
So there was a bigger
This
issue.
isn't the problem itself. This is a symptom of the problem.
Yep.
And so again,
It's
it's
sort of a
going to percolate.
spearhead of a much larger issue.
We're going to see more of this, not less of this. And again, I think it does help bolster the case of those who say something isn't right on our campuses.
You think
When
that congressional hearing was helpful for those people?
I think it helped them to expose what they see as a problem
Got it.
to people. Yes. Now, I think for a lot of people, they'll think this was a one-time thing. This was an individual thing with these three people, or this whatever, that with these presidents or whatever. But I think the longer term effort will again be more people or more institutions challenged for how they educate or
Yeah.
what goes
Not
on the
on
what
not
goes
on
on
the
the
issue of
campus.
anti-Semitism necessarily, but just
Right.
broader.
Yeah. I mean, this is again, this is one of several issues that will come to the fore on this front.
So, I think we should kind of put a pin in this one because I know that you and I both want to come back to this when we have our broader conversation about free
Yep.
speech, right? So we'll come back to this one, but I want to go back to the Nikki Haley um, point because one thing that she brought up that I thought was really interesting that she brought up, and I'm curious about your thoughts on it. I I almost giggled because at one point she said something like, "Well, that guy was a plant." And I was like, "What? Why would you care? Why does that like why is that something that you're saying to the news media as if it as if it sways the way that people would feel about it?" Do you what were your thoughts on that when she said that about the guy?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he was. I mean, I'm
Right.
sure that,
But again,
but
does it
yeah,
like
it's
even if
probably
you
irrelevant. But for anybody who would be, and I can't imagine anybody stumbling upon this who didn't care enough about it to be paying attention, would probably understand that that's what it was too. I don't know. Maybe maybe just bought her some time to say something. Yeah, but it is an issue. I mean, I think he got a different answer than he expected to get for an answer from her.
do you think
Uh,
so?
yeah. Well, I
Oh, I
think
thought he kind of got the answer right. And maybe I misread this, but I thought he was expecting her to answer similarly to a way that he had heard her answer it
yes,
some years before, and she did still
yes,
answer it sort of similarly.
right. And I think,
You think he thought she was gonna change the way she talked about it?
yeah, I
Oh,
think I thought he
interesting.
thought maybe she would say something different in a different back with a different setting.
Oh, see,
I
and
don't
I
know.
thought he was trying to get that's interesting that that's your take because I thought he was trying to get her to say the same thing, but to the wrong audience. You know what I mean? Like he was trying to get her to give sort of
But
her
don't you think it's a catch 22? I
well,
mean,
that's what's fascinating. I never even thought
right.
about it from your
I
angle.
mean, that's what I mean. So this guy can ask the question and there isn't a
No.
right answer because if she says what she said before, she's in front of a different group of people. And if it's going to be harder to say that. And if she says something different, then she's
He'll
caught by saying something different
he'll
to the
bring
same
forward
question.
the other interview
Yeah.
where he
So, I
didn't say
mean,
that.
yeah, it's a artful way of, going about it. But
Interesting.
again, I think that's why she says this is a plant. I mean, that helps her to
Does
have
it?
people understand. But well, I mean, but today, what question isn't a plant? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
but
that's what I was
but
saying. I mean, if you're getting a recorded town hall or whatever the thing was, like you gotta assume it's gonna end up on the internet, right?
yeah,
Especially if somebody's at so
right.
I guess
Well, everything is everywhere today, so it
yeah.
doesn't really matter. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he was expecting. I guess, but I could see where there. It's hard to have a right answer because you're burned one way or the other on it. But
I don't know if you are. I mean, I think that I guess that's the piece that why I think your take on it is fascinating because I think if she had, let's say, evolved, her answer had evolved from the time when she was in South Carolina. I think that's something you can say, right? I think that is also a mistake that we make in assuming that people have to always already have the right answer. But she could say, like, yes, I did say that in the past and I was wrong. And I should have been talking about it this way. And I know that now. And whatever. I mean, again,
no, no,
you
no,
know,
and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I just think that the way it was presented was in a way that the it was whoever was who was ever asking the question was doing it in a way to try to get something in a way that there wasn't going to be an easy answer to it, no matter what you did. I mean, it didn't make any sense. It didn't make either way. It was going to be used
hmm,
as a story in my mind.
interesting. Well,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any idea. And I honestly, I didn't see it. I only saw coverage of it. So again, this is we're
well,
guilty
and that's
of
what's so interesting, right? Did
lying.
any of us watch any of the rest of the town hall?
Right. No, yeah, right. So again, we are as guilty as everybody else in America of only paying attention to specific sources that that will cover it and put it in front of our faces. So that's what happens.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So all of that, yes, we understand the media. I think these two women are particularly interesting because they happen to have happened at similar times. So watching that over the past couple of weeks has been
Hmm.
an interesting thing that I've been kind of just following along with. But I guess here's the bigger question that I have, which is that if we don't like the way the current news is funded, the way the incentive system for the way news is reported. What do you think are the options that we have for changing
Well,
it, for opting out of it, for what can you do?
I think it evolves on its own. I think when people decide this isn't the way we want it, or we want something different, there will be people there to take advantage of that and provide it in a different way. I think the polarization part of it, people have gone where they feel comfortable a lot of times with their sources. And I think when they find out that they haven't gotten what they needed through that, they'll begin to look in different places.
But do
And
you think they feel any sort of sense of betrayal at that, right? Like if you're sitting there and you realize that like the news that you've been consuming is either lopsided or missing context, or do you think people feel, I mean, I will say this is why I'm really picky about where I get my news. So because I don't like that. I need a sense of trust with my news sources, the way I curate news. And do you think people lose that trust?
I think the process will take care of itself. I really do. I think what happens is, um, just like these people who were brought before Congress or questioned at a here at a town hall, when media is irresponsible, to a certain extent, media will be able to point out that media was irresponsible, and did and hold media accountable for things that today we find acceptable. There will be exceptions. The further the pendulum goes to each side, the more isolated they are, the more likely they are to not convey things in a way that contributes to their base's development in a proper way. And I think people will see that things will happen. I don't know what it would be, what the events will be, but I think there will be something that will allow the middle ground to have more exposure, and again to be able to say, here's what's wrong with what you just saw. This is the consequence of that,
Yeah.
or this is the consequence for relying on this when it isn't correct. Um, as you know, we had a little bit of conversation before we started today. Um, there's when media covers things, there's things they say, there's things they don't say too, and what they choose not to cover, or how they are doing it. When they make mistakes, those kind of things, I think they will pay a price for that. When they make big mistakes, they'll pay a price for it.
Well, I think that's really interesting. And I don't know. I guess it's just I'm still muddling through this, right? Because I think the part that I'm struggling with a little bit is, and I've talked about this before, I don't like a feeling of sort of um I don't like feeling like Congress is playing this role of swaying opinions through, I don't know,
I just
power,
don't think
leverage.
that's new. I think that's
I don't think
always
it's new.
been.
I don't think it's new either. I just don't like it.
Yeah, well, I just think that's a part of the strategy. I mean, these are people who have a nationwide public forum, and they can focus on things, and that's to our country's benefit, and it can be to our detriment, um, depending on how those things play out. But I think that's a great tool to be had, to be used constructively, and when it isn't, it's people's responsibility too to demonstrate why how it has been misused, if it has been, and I
Yeah,
think
that's a
that's
good point.
okay.
That's a good
So
point.
I mean, again, there's, as the world is today in the world of media, there's two sides to most stories. I mean, it isn't like it's all lopsided and you're hearing only one thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we have people who have different positions. I mean, we have enterprises that have different opinions, and they are polarizing, but they can challenge each other too, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
No,
And
I
I
agree. I
think
think the disagreement is important, right? And we've
right.
talked about this. Like, I don't ever think the goal is to have one-sided
Right.
Like that's never what I'm looking for. I think the disagreement's important. I guess I just feel like there needs to be some honor behind the disagreement, right? Like,
Oh,
yeah, that's like, like, can we do this with a sense of like respect or
yeah.
I guess I
Yeah,
don't know.
I get that side of it. I get that part of it, and to me too, is it a civil discussion? Can we
Yeah,
have a civil discussion here instead of punching each other in the eye or whatever in the face?
yeah.
Can we do something like that? And I do think there is an appetite for that, and I think it all starts like we talked about here. The conversations we have with our friends and neighbors, and
Yeah.
being able to do that in a constructive way.
I'm
Uh,
like, can we ask for better than a soundbite, right?
yeah,
Can
yeah.
we be the kind of people ourselves who are like, you know what? No, actually, I'm uninterested in that 15 seconds. I want to hear the hour. Like, I
Right.
want to
Or
understand the
give me
hour.
the option. Give me the
Yeah,
option
yeah,
of an extended play. I mean, I don't mind hearing your sound bites. That's fine. Give me everything that I want. Present that. And today we have options that we never had, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, today you can go online and find the entire broadcast if you want to go look for it. And that wasn't an option before. We
yeah.
relied
That's true.
entirely on media to tell us the story about whatever it was, and that's the only place we could get the information largely. I mean, there might be a print version of a hearing someplace if you could go find it, but that wasn't going to happen. So, I mean, in some ways, we have more options today than ever, but it's almost like you have too many options in some ways too.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I think we have to stop because I think we've gone too long today.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop us. But I think what I'll ask at the end is like, thank you for listening if you did. I think we were trying to figure out, we know we want to do this longer piece on free speech at some point, but we wanted to talk a little bit about what had happened over the last couple of weeks. Would love to know about your news sources, right? Are you happy with your news sources? Have you changed news sources? Are you like Dad and you are reading across the political spectrum? Where do they come from? Are they social media, print? Wow, if they're print, I'd be really impressed. Television. Let us know that. And are there places where you notice gaps? Are there spaces where you're really happy with coverage? Do you have any other questions that go in there, Dad?
Where do your life experiences trump these
Yeah,
kinds of immediate sources when it comes to your purview or your perspective on these
yeah,
issues? I mean, and I think for a lot of people, I think personally, I think I have my life experience. When I look at these sources, I challenge them mentally, no
yeah.
matter no matter who I'm listening to. And I think a lot of people do that. I think most people do that,
Yes,
but
we're reading them as critical readers.
you're still relying on something to trigger all of that, and that's a part of the issue. So
Totally. Okay. So we'd love to hear from you. We're at ourhouseundivided@gmail.com. We hope you all had a nice couple of weeks. We will talk to y'all soon. Bye, Dad. Love you.
love you, Jamie.